Welcome back to X Minutes, the C++ series. Today we're going to be going over basic input and output in our applications, in our console applications, and go over all the different variable types that we're going to be using in C++. I have Visual Studio 2019 open, and I'm going to come here and do a create new project. Now I do need to make sure that I come down here in the list and choose C++ from the dropdown. And you'll notice on the right-hand side here, I have empty project, console, CMake, desktop wizard. I'm just going to start with the console application. Most of our demos will. It sets up a lot of nice things for us. Empty project, we could start from there as well, but I prefer using the console app. And we are going to call this demo variables. And create the project. Just like we did during the last video, it will have it come up with our main and a line here with a C out. That stands for console output. So that's going to draw to the console or the window. And it's going to just say hello world. When I run this, it's going to come up and there is my hello world right there. The main program that we have right here, that is going to be called by the compiler. It's going to be called and to start with. You can actually set this to where you can have multiple parameters being passed in. In that case, it typically is an int argc for the count, and then a character pointer argv. That's an array. You will typically have that set up, but the console application will have it with nothing, and that's perfectly valid, and that's okay. Let's go over a few of the data types, and if you've done any other programming before, a lot of these data types are going to be very familiar to you. We'll start off with the basic integer. So we'll say x position. An integer is a whole number. It could be positive, it could be negative. If you do want a whole number that is only positive, I can say that is an unsigned int. Unsigned, ed, int. And that is a y position here. So that one is only positive numbers and 0. Now the next one to look at is float. And we'll say salary. It's any kind of a decimal or fractional type of number. So it could be something like 13.6. It could be anything with a decimal point, but it could also be 5, which just ends up being 5.0. Besides int and float, we also have long, and we'll do a W position. And we also have double. And we will say bank account. Long and double are pretty much the same things as ints and floats, except they are twice the size in memory. And in a future video, we'll be going over the size of all of the different data structures and variable types. But integers are, if you're running it as a 32-bit program, they're going to be 32-bit. If you're running as a 64-bit program, they'll be 64-bit. Longs are going to be double that. So it's going to be 64-bit, or if you are in a 64-bit Windows and compiling for 64-bit, then it'll still be 64-bit. And so the same thing with floats. It's you start gaining more precision and everything else if you have a double. It does more values on the right of the decimal point. In other languages, we also have some things like a string. Now, the problem is in C++, we do not have a class for string. What we have is we have a class for a character pointer or a character array. We'll just say character pointer equals, and then Steve inside of quotes here. So I can come in here and say it's a character pointer to Steve. Now this is saying that it is a constant character pointer and I can't cast it. So I may have to do a typecast here. There we go. For it to like it. Now I have a variable that is a string that points to the word Steve. Now that's kind of hard to change. It's hard to manipulate in this fashion. C++ does have many functions for manipulating and changing strings, searching them, getting the length of them, all the normal ones that you would think would be in a string class. But they are just separate external functions. We're going to get over and do more and more different data types as we continue. But the only other one, which is, I'm going to give, actually, we're going to talk about two more. Bool is a Boolean, and that is going to be true or false. And the last one is short, and we will call that the U position. Boolean being true or false. True meaning that it's non-zero, false meaning that it's a zero, actually ends up being the same size as an integer. And a short ends up being 16 or 32 bits of data based on how you're compiling. So it is a shorter version of an integer. Now in C++, sizing of variables can be very important when we're making our data structures and passing data around. So it's important to understand that a Boolean is not just one bit. We're going to have a future video on bitwise manipulation to look at being able to set and change individual bits inside of a variable. But this one is actually going to be the size of an integer. Keep in mind, we will go over that in the future, but I just wanted some really basic things here. The next thing to cover is to be able to output things. So if I have all of these variables and I'm going to say my X position equals 100, I can set that up ahead of time. And then in the cout, you'll notice that I have a few things here on the cout line. And I'm going to change this. I'm going to get rid of the /n. And I'm going to put another double less than sign and do std : end L. That's the same thing as the /n. It just does a new line at the end of the line. It tells us that it is going to do a cout, so it's outputting to the console. I am outputting this string and then a new line at the end. That's what cout it will do for us. Now, if I want to actually output that X position, what I can do is I can say standard cout, and then I can come here and just say X position. I did forget the double there. Okay, there we go. So when I go to run this now, what it's going to do is it'll come out here and output, and notice that it does come in and say, hello world 100. Now, overall, we do want to have a label on that. So I'm going to come here and just put in inside of quotes, X position equals, and then I'm going to do another double less than sign. So it now says cout double less than my label, double less than, and then the variable itself, double, and then the arrow there and the end line. Now, when I run this, ends up outputting out as X position equals 100. That is how we can do very simple outputs. But what about inputs? A lot of systems, especially in console applications, will read things in as strings, and then you need to convert them over to the right data type. The input version of cout, which is called cin, will automatically convert things for you. So if I came here and said standard cin, and I'm going to do my arrows the other way this time, and I'm going to say input into Y position. Okay. What that's going to do is it'll output hello world, X position, and then it will wait to read in from the console. What the C stands for is console. It'll read in from the console a integer, an unsigned integer. Now I'm going to print that out. I'm just going to copy this line. One thing you'll notice, I don't do a lot of macros or copying a whole bunch of code at one time. What I ended up doing is I copied that whole line from 18 to 20. But what I did is I went onto the line with my cursor without having anything highlighted, and I hit Control C to copy. That actually copies the whole line. Then I just went down and pasted. So let's change the label to say Y position and change the variable to Y position. And if we run this, now it's sitting here at an input. So I can say, oh, it's 78. It then comes out and says my Y position equals 78. The other thing is that it never prompted us. I didn't know what we were inputting at all. We may want to put in, anytime we do an input, we may want to do an output. Whoops, output going that way, and to say enter Y position. I'm going to make sure to put a space there. Now, in this case, I am not going to do an end line. I want it to be right on the same line. Let's try this out. Okay. Comes here and it says enter Y position. We have it set up to read an unsigned integer, which is only positive. What do you think might happen if I say -10? And we get this huge number. That's because numbers will actually wrap around when you hit the extent. Since 0 is the lowest number, it wrapped around to the maximum number as I went negative. So you do have to be careful when you have unsigned ones. Now, I can do the exact same thing for salary. And if I output it, then I'm just going to put in here salary. And we'll read in the salary here. And I guess we'll put in a nice little prompt. And output our salary. Okay. Now I get our Y position that I need to read in. Let's say that's 8. And our salary is going to be 10,000. And it came in here and put in 10,000. Now, if we run that again, and I'm going to say that it is 56.87. So I'm going to say that's 5687, and it outputs that it was 5687. I didn't have to worry about converting the string into a float or an integer. It automatically did it for me. Doing that with a character pointer, though, is going to be a little trickier. If I was to try and do that with name, let's give that a shot here. Enter name. And let's put in name here, and let's output the name. All right, now when we run this, our Y position is 4, our salary is 54.98, and the name is John. Notice that we actually got a write access violation. We can't change and read in data into a character array like that. It just does not function the same way. In a future video, we're going to go over the standard template library. That's where the standard comes from here. and we will be able to read in strings using the string class that's there. But for now, I have all of my variables that I have here inside of my main. So these are all local variables to my main. I'm able to read in different values, output different values, and be able to prompt for everything. I think this is a good place to end for this video. Nice and simple. We read in our variables, we output variables, and we saw that strings and character arrays, character pointers, are going to give us some problems. We want to take a look at all this, and if you like this video, please give a like, give us a comment about it. If you'd like to see something else future in C++, feel free to drop us a line, and feel free to subscribe to make sure to catch the future videos. Thank you very much.